Good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. My name's Becky Quick, and I'm an anchor on CNBC Squawk Box. That's our signature morning show. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you Rutgers alumni. I'm also a Rutgers graduate myself. I graduated from the Rutgers College class of 1993. And it is really a pleasure to be here with so many Rutgers alumni and with our guest this evening, Rutgers University President and Distinguished Professor Jonathan Holloway. This is an exciting moment and an exciting time with everything that's been happening for Rutgers. As many of you probably know, President Holloway started in July of 2020, and I can't really think of a more challenging time to try to be stepping in and taking over at a huge university like Rutgers. He's been not only trying to lead this major public research university through an incredibly challenging pandemic that hit front and center right here in New Jersey, but also been trying to introduce some major initiatives that are aimed at transforming Rutgers culture and its academic standing. He's been coming at this really hard and doing lots of other priorities along the way. One other of his big goals has been to hold these ongoing conversations that give alumni opportunities to share their thoughts and ideas. And that's why we're so pleased to have all of you here tonight. And I'm really happy to be playing a role in this. It is gratifying to see so many other members of the global community from Rutgers in attendance here tonight. I've been really excited about this, and I know President Holloway has been too. So with that, let me just again say welcome to everyone and give a warm welcome to President Jonathan Holloway. President?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Becky, for that introduction and those kind words. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm looking forward rather quickly to jump into a conversation. It is always exciting to meet new Rutgers faces. Becky and I met 10 minutes ago and off camera, just to get to know each other a little bit. And what drives me crazy, of course, is I can't be doing this in person. But in this case, we can reach so many more alumni. So thank you all for being here. As Becky said, this has been quite a year. You know, I was announced, if you do recall, on January 21st of 2020, which, I mean, if you're like me, COVID has collapsed to time, so it seems like years ago. But I was announced January 21st of 2020 as the next president, and really was very excited about coming into Rutgers as we all knew it in January of 2020. And as you all know, 6 weeks later, the campus shuts down and the country starts to shut down. And so the university I thought I was coming to sort of changed fundamentally. And I knew that very quickly, one of my biggest first challenges was to do what I could to help Rutgers get back on its feet. And that has been a lot of the work of this first year. And I imagine we'll talk about some of those things in the hour that we have together. There's been a lot of other work that I've been busy pursuing, and I'll outline a few pieces of it. But I will say this: it's important to know, I want to say from the start, that I was about 4 months into the job, and Mark Engelson, who's chair of the Board of Governors, who is the one who recruited me to consider applying for this job, and then oversaw the process in which I got hired. I talk with him every couple of weeks. And about 4 months into the job, he said, "So, are you having fun?" I paused for a little bit too long, to be honest, and I said, "Mark, I don't think anybody in higher ed is having fun right now. It is really hard everywhere in the country." I said, "But I have no regrets." And that's what I want you to know. I have no regrets. This year has been one challenge after another, but I've seen instances, one after another, of Rutgers' resilience, of real pride in the institution. While I have only met a handful of students in person, truly just a handful, the energy that they have is a great reminder of all the things I love about being on a college campus. My senior team has rallied, well, not just my senior team, the Rutgers administration, the faculty, the staff, students, they've all rallied in the best ways to make the best of a really difficult, close to impossible situation. So, I think what because I don't want to I was told to talk for 15 minutes. I don't want to spend 15 minutes being a talking head to all of you. I want to be in a conversation. I want to get to your questions. What I want to really focus on is how impressed I am with Rutgers. The reason I got here is something, the reason I put my name in the hat to come here, something that's been affirmed over and over again. And this part's really important to me. I had been at private institutions for basically all of my academic career, 22 previous years. And I was asked during the search process, why are you looking at Rutgers? And not because it wasn't about it being a great school or not a great school, it's a great school, but as a public institution. And I said, that's actually precisely why I'm interested in Rutgers, because it is an astonishing place. And there's a turn of phrase that I've come to lean on, but it captures exactly why I was interested in the position, is that Rutgers represents the democratic possibilities of this country. Now, that may sound grand to you, and if it does, that's okay, but I believe in the democratic possibilities of this country. And I believe it's really important that we find institutions that embody that possibility, and we support them, because we all know we are in a tough time in this country. Regardless of your political position, we are in a tough time in this country. And I think that we need to invest in places like Rutgers that say, if you can pass the bar of gaining entrance, we don't care where you're coming from. We don't care what your language at home is. We don't care if you're first generation. We don't care if you're fourth generation. We don't care if you're Pell eligible, if you're wealthy, we don't care what your skin color looks like. We want talent to come to Rutgers, and we want to take all those different narratives, all those different potentials, pull them together and shape them into something that's really amazing. That's what this country is supposed to all be about. And I think Rutgers mirrors it. So in that regard, one of the things that is really important to me is amplifying Rutgers' already impressive commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I've launched a number of initiatives that we can talk about during the Q&A that are about bolstering this. And this is really about gaining strategic leverage or positioning Rutgers to be able to take advantage strategically of a changing country's demographics. So this is a really smart, and it's also the right way to go forward. It's been exciting to amplify a great program that's already existed before I got here called the Scarlet Promise Grants, which is about bolstering those students who are most in the most fragile financial positions, so that we can find ways to alleviate those challenges so that they can simply just be students and not having to wonder how an emergency dental bill for $700, I'm making that up, appears they have to drop out of school. We don't want that to happen. Scarlet Promise Grants helps make sure that doesn't happen. So we're, launched a big fundraising drive to amplify Scarlet Promise Grants, making important strides in developing big ideas for the university, where we're going to be focusing our fundraising attention over the next, essentially over the length of my presidency, on issues related to the climate, on issues related to accessibility for the university, on issues related to pandemic planning, scientific discovery, artificial intelligence, et cetera. And we're also in a pivotal moment for Rutgers, in the sense that my job is not merely to be the president of Rutgers, but my job is to be the chief fundraiser, the chief lobbyist, the chief cheerleader, and in that regard, the chief connecting, the chief connective tissue. Doesn't make sense, but you know what I'm trying to say. In terms of the alumni community, I just think we have such a powerful, potentially transformative community amongst our alumni that we have not tapped into successfully. We have not done enough work, I think, to really get the Rutgers community revved up as much as they can, so all of you can be obnoxiously proud of this great university. And so my job is to get out there. We're doing it now virtually, and hopefully in a handful of months be doing it in person, to come out and see you where you are, so I can hear your stories about Rutgers, so I could tell you my stories about Rutgers, and together we can write a beautiful story together. So that's all I want to say for now. I want to turn it back to Becky to get me into more specific details about where we are, what we want to do, and then hear from all of you.
President Holloway, thank you so much. I love what you said about this being such an important democratic institution. I feel the same way about it. And we're going to jump into that a little bit more in depth now too. But I want to start with probably the news of the day and something that the nation's been watching, Rutgers. Today, Georgetown just came out and said that it's going to be requiring its students to get vaccinated before they can come back to the campus in full in the fall. They're copying a move that you were the first to come up with. Rutgers was the very first in the nation and been followed by Brown, Northeastern, and now Georgetown, of universities that will be requiring those vaccinations. It's not an easy move, but it is one that people are watching pretty closely. I just wonder, how did you come to that decision?
It's thanks for asking. It is absolutely on all of our minds these days. When we announced, I work backwards. When we announced, we actually didn't know that we were the first in the nation to do so. We were being bold accidentally, to be honest. But we'll claim it. We'll absolutely claim it. And I'm not really that surprised that more schools are joining in that position. And I suspect a lot more are going to join as well. I do know that our Office of General Counsel has been contacted by, I think, over 40 other schools' general counsels wanting to know, how did you do it? Like, what's the legal space that allowed you to get to that place? There's no doubt universities want to do it. They're trying to figure out how. But this was the culmination of a lot of work, whether it was from a legal perspective, the epidemiological perspective, the science. I'm thinking of different people in my cabinet, scientific leaders, people working on social psychology. Like, what do we need to do? How can we reassure people that we are going to be as close to normal in the fall and that we're going to be as safe as possible in the fall? And we want people to be confident about those things. And the first question I was asked, after being presented with a lot of options and details, Jonathan, are you comfortable mandating the vaccination for people who live on campus? Like, absolutely. Congregate housing, congregate dining halls. We already require vaccinations for this very reason, for lots of other things. I feel very comfortable with that. How comfortable are you with requiring people who live off campus? I'm like, well, that's interesting. And then the person asking that, well, and they'll be coming on campus. I'm like, well, if we don't require them to be vaccinated, what's the point of doing it at all? So it was sort of an all-in move, and really meant to reassure our own faculty, staff, and students, and to let the people who've applied to Rutgers, who've been admitted, that yes, this is our plan going forward. And now here we are.
I hope that other schools follow, but just in terms of who's required and who's not, staff is not required. Why not that hurdle? What made you say no to that?
Well, there's a couple different factors there. The first is that there are some statutory spaces in New Jersey and regulatory spaces that actually allow us to make this requirement of our students. That if we're in a situation of a health emergency, if we follow the advice of a committee on immunization policies from the CDC, that we can add more, we can require other vaccinations. It's actually written into the statute for our students. And this is because they're living in congregate housing. Our faculty and staff are coming from their own homes, their own spaces. Now, these are also people who by and large are eager to get vaccinated already anyway. But for the students living in dormitory spaces or in crowded apartments, as younger people tend to do, this is the key to making sure that we can provide as much safety as possible. We know from this past semester, when we have a very light student population on campus, that something like 70% greater or higher infectious rate, positive rate amongst our students than amongst our staff and faculty. So we're focusing on where the problem is or the challenge is, and that's our path forward.
What's the reaction that you've gotten from the university community?
Overwhelmingly positive. If I had to, put a number to it, 75-25 positives, negative. And most of the negatives really about questions. Now, the fact is we were mandating vaccinations, but the same exceptions are available to people for religious reasons and for health reasons. So we're following our own policy that's well established. And this is something that's across the nation. This is not breaking new ground in that regard. So there are a lot of questions about that. And frankly, there are people who are very concerned about its experimental status, which we understand. We think this would be FDA approved before the start of the school year. Frankly, we feel very confident about these vaccines being FDA approved. And then there's a certain population who are skeptics and who are vaccine hesitant or simply aren't going to go down this path. And so that's part of it. We did get noise from people, and this is also typical in the world in which I operate, at least, people who have no relationship to Rutgers at all from other parts of the country usually chime in and explain things to me. So I'm worried about the Rutgers folks.
Yeah, that makes sense. I will ask you, just in terms of, you said in your opening remarks that nobody in higher ed was having fun over this last year because there were so many challenges thrown your way. What was the toughest challenge you faced, and how'd you deal with it?
Well, I mean, there's what I'll call an abiding, long, tough challenge and a very intense one. The long one is, Rutgers is a community of 100,000 people. New Brunswick, where my offices are located, where I live in Piscataway, is a community of 50,000 students, undergrad and grad. I've literally never seen 4 or 5 in person. Well, I did address the football team for 5 minutes, but like in terms of just seeing around campus, it's like a ghost town. So I have no proper sense of what the place feels like. So here I am super excited about coming to a place, ready to engage the students and meet the faculty, and it's crickets. So at sort of this long, slow burn, at sort of this level of psychology, it's like, where have I come? And this is my home office. Sorry for the mess, but this is where I am most of my days. We all know this. I mean, this is what we're all dealing with. So that's hard. The thing that has been piercingly difficult was the decision that I was recommended to me, that I endorsed, so I own it, to move our commencement virtual. I can't think of a more unpopular decision than that one, for every reason I totally understand. And when it came down, I'm still getting complaints about it, which I also understand. Rutgers has a great number of schools that are small enough that you could have a safe in-person commencement. I know we can. In fact, other New Jersey schools are having in-person commencements, but we're a monster of a university. And if I did not like the idea of saying yes to 6 schools and then saying no to the School of Arts and Sciences with its 6,000 graduates, because we literally can't support that in a safe way. And that is, it is hard to say we're going to be fair by being, making everybody feel a level of pain. And that's not, there's nothing good about that. And when students write to me and parents write to me, angry, emotional, disgusted about this issue, I get it. But at the end of the day, I still think it's the right decision to make, as painful as it is. And that is my job in these situations.
In terms of looking at the safety aspects, how do you prioritize it? How do you figure out what you can say yes to, what you can't? This has, again, been such a unique and unusual year.
Yeah, there's no easy way to talk about it. I mean, it's just that it is hard. And everybody, people are often right in their claim about this piece of the puzzle or this piece of the puzzle. But in my job, there's 100 pieces of the puzzle at every moment. And once you start to assemble all these pieces, you realize it's not going to hold together. It's not going to fit. And so that's been the most painful part of the job so far, I must say.
Wish I could give you a hug right now and welcome you.
Socially distant.
Yeah. High five.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about one more national issue that's been out there. President Biden has asked his new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, to prepare a report on the president's legal authority to cancel up to $50,000 in student debt for every borrower. It's got lots of areas excited. It's got other pockets that are resentful about it and saying, how can we possibly afford this? And as somebody who is running a large public university, I just wonder what your take is on a move like that.
The thing I really want to, when it comes to these kinds of declarations, I get very cautious because the devil is in the details. Like, so I'm really glad it's about studying this. Like, what's the feasibility? We all know it's a sexy headline. Who wouldn't? Well, I think it's a powerful and positive thing to reduce student debt or eliminate student debt. Yes, unleash that power into the economy. That's a great thing. But boy, there's a lot of things that are implicated in making that kind of move. I mean, it will solve some problems, some really immediate problems, and it could create other ones. In terms of destabilizing certain economies. Now, maybe some of them need to be destabilized. There are certain aspects of the student loan market that I think are deeply troubled, to be politic, and are preying upon students. And there's nothing good about that. But there are the notion of student debt has become such a so politicized that we've gotten away from other kinds of conversations, like, how do we get to this place in the first place? And frankly, we've defunded higher education. And when politicians talk to me about, or legislators, the cost of Rutgers is getting too high, I'm like, well, there's a reason for that. It was like the state appropriation has dropped radically over the last 20 years, but our fixed costs have only gone up. And things that we must do now that a generation ago we wouldn't have thought about in terms of campus safety. We have to build whole administrative structures, let's say, to support issues relating to discrimination. This is a good thing, but we don't get extra money for it. So every dollar has to be stretched further. And so I would welcome a much more robust conversation about funding of higher education in general, so that we don't have students having to take out these exorbitant loans in the first place. Now, as far as the people who are saying, well, it's not fair, I took out loans, and I'm like, well, I get it. I took out loans and paid them off, but you got to start somewhere. And the benefit of, again, taking the cork out of the bottle. I mean, tapping into the potential, unleashing the potential of people who can then, whether it's by increased consumption, by increased experimentation of job opportunities because they don't have this huge weight over their head, it could be tremendously transformative for the economy. But I want to know more. I want this to be taken out of a political realm. I want it to be studied by a bunch of boring analysts who are going to be apolitical and deliver a really dry answer. Then I'll think, okay, we're in a good place there.
I like that commentary. I agree with that. One question for you. I used to follow this pretty closely, but it's been a while. What portion of the university's budget does the state legislature pick up at this point versus 20 years ago?
It's 20% right now. And if you add in fringe, it gets complicated. The simple answer is 20%. If I'm it was at least 40% a couple of decades ago. And that I wish I should be more precise. I know that, but I don't have the number in front of me. But it's been a pretty radical drop.
That is hard to even imagine.
Yes.
Getting your head around. That brings us to something you brought up in your opening remarks, and that's the Scarlet Promise grants. For people who aren't familiar with that, what are they? How do they work?
The best way to describe the Scarlet Promise grant, I refer to that $700 situation. So this is a true story. I will not mention, of course, the individual, but someone who is a student in one of our campuses, first generation to go to college, maybe the first to finish high school. I don't remember that piece of the puzzle, and was going through school, doing well, and then suffered some serious tragedy in his family. And then all of a sudden he was the person who had to hold things together and was trying to find a way to figure out how to pay rent on the family apartment, how to do this, how to do that. And he's 20 years old. He doesn't know. And was looking at stopping out of school for a semester because he had to pay this bill that for him was just simply too big. And somehow, in this part I don't know, word got to him about the Scarlet Promise grants. And so he went to the office and said, oh, here's my situation. And they said, wait, we will pay for this for you. And this was less than $1,000, okay? The important thing that people may not know, and but it's well established in higher ed, especially for students who come from economically challenging backgrounds, who routinely stop out for really small amounts of money. The odds of them returning to school get higher and or the height of the hurdle gets higher and higher and higher. And so you have people who are a semester short of graduating, and they aren't going to graduate because they can't pay for a $2,000 bill. They can't, and they've invested all this time. And think of the lost potential of that person because they don't have that college degree, right? So in this case, this person got that help, got back on his feet, graduating this next month, already has a job lined up in public policy, public affairs in his community. That's a good story. Scarlet Promise grants do that for tons of students at Rutgers. Most of the grants are very small, less than $1,000. In some cases, they top up somebody's financial aid package. They can actually attend Rutgers. The way I look at it is that Scarlet Promise grants are designed to allow talented students to simply be students. Like other aspects of their complicated lives or circumstances, the grant is there to take care of it so they can then go on and do great things. I think it's just inspiring. And when I was transitioning into Rutgers, I wanted to do something in light of the challenges everybody was facing with COVID. And I'm in a very privileged position and I'm well compensated at the university. So I took a big pay cut. And then also my wife and I made the biggest gift in our life of giving, a $75,000 gift to the university, 2 Scarlet Promise grants explicitly, and mounted a focused campaign of $10 million to sort of boost attention to the grant program and boost resources. And we are closing in on completing that campaign. We've had a number of major gifts, but I think more inspiring, we've had thousands of small gifts. And I've been spending a lot of time this year talking about Scarlet Promise grant program, and $50 across 10 donors each. That will get a student across the finish line to get their diploma. That's powerful, right? So thousands of alumni or friends of the university have given small gifts, and now we're closing in on $9 million towards our $10 million goal. So can't be more excited about this and more proud. And really, to me, it goes back to think about that democratic possibility of the university. This is about helping the people who are at greatest risk just get across the finish line and go off like rocket ships.
So if I'm an alumni or alumni, and I'd like to get involved with that, do I give a specific check just for that? Or is there a way that I could even maybe adopt a student? If you tell me somebody needs this, if I don't know their name, can I say, here's their situation, can I fill the gap?
You can cater it. You can, if you just, how I find anything, just Scarlet Promise Grant Rutgers, you'll get taken right to the page. And then you can really tailor it towards the New Brunswick, Newark, Camden. You can start tailoring it down. And we've had gifts that you can give it to endowment. You can give it to like who needs cash right this moment. So it is all about trying to help out people in the moment and as long as we can ever imagine. And so you get to be in the driver's seat in terms of making that choice.
You keep coming back to diversity and inclusion. And I've always thought of Rutgers as being such a diverse, inclusive place to begin with. The alumni are such an incredibly diverse asset. You've talked about this briefly, but how do you tap that asset and help get them working on these same goals?
That's a great question. I mean, I think, well, I'll speak broadly as a nation and then as a Rutgers community. As a nation, we need to become better at and more comfortable dealing with kind of uncomfortable conversations. We need to become better at realizing that talking about some sort of difference is not equivalent to being an accusation. We need to find ways to recognize that supporting one another in diverse communities, while people might think of it as the morally right thing to do or the ethically right thing to do, which I do think, as president, I come at it from a different standpoint. Like, it is strategic. It is in the best interest of the university, because we know the country is changing from a demographic standpoint. That is fact on the ground. And we had, for our own national interest, better be prepared to train up populations who are coming from different backgrounds than historically was the case. And we need to learn about their experiences and provide the best education we can so they can go off and be in service to the university, to the state, to the nation, to the world. And if we are not strategic about that, we will be left behind. We'll become seen as less and less relevant, not just we Rutgers, but higher education in general. So for me, I think this is like a national project. And I think people need to do a much better job of granting grace to one another as folks are sincerely curious and don't know how to go forward. That's okay to not know, as long as they want to be educated. I think we need to be clear about when institutions fail, and that we need to hold institutions accountable, including Rutgers, including me. And leaders need to recognize that it's important to be held accountable. It is not about, hopefully, not about your personal failure, but maybe you took your eye off the ball or something. You need to fix things and make it better. We need to recognize that talking about diversity is not about taking something away from somebody. It's about sharing and creating more. So for me, it's about a kind of a philosophical shift that people need to engage in, to recognize the powerful strengths that come from a diverse population. I mean, really, the amount of money we waste in this country because we aren't open to training the best workforce possible, and we get caught in our old habits of wanting to hire people who only came from the certain school or look a certain way. We're missing out on so much talent, and we need to be better than that.
I want to get to some questions from the audience, because we had a lot of good ones that came in. We'll go through as many of these as we can. The first question comes from Marilyn Carnevale. She's a Rutgers Business School, New Brunswick graduate, 2011. And she writes, to build a more inclusive community, how would you suggest those listening to challenge themselves to get out of their comfort zone? What can we all do today to make a difference tomorrow?
Well, I'll speak, thank you for the question. I'll speak a bit metaphorically. Something I would tell students all the time is that, they're convinced they want to become X. Well, each semester, take a class in Y or something else, in some other part of the alphabet that you're like, why would I even do that? I'm like, to expand your mind. That's the whole point of the university experience, right? So if you're no longer in the university, no longer a student, I think that if you took the time to, I like books, right? Pick up a book on a topic you don't know something about, and there's lots of them out there right now, certainly. Go to a place, a social media place, I always say it with caution, but go to a place that you wouldn't normally go and simply spend time there trying to understand what's going on. Thinking about engaging diversity and thinking about inclusion is not easy. It requires work, and that's why we often don't do it, because it requires work and it requires being a little uncomfortable. But as a former athlete, I know you cannot get better unless you put your body in some stress, through practice, through trying harder. So it really is about exploring, and frankly, humbling yourself, all of us, literally all of us, humbling ourselves a bit and saying, I don't know.
What's your
And
sport?
what's that?
You said you're an athlete. What's your sport?
I shouldn't have brought that. Right when it came out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have brought that up. I played football and I watched football in college. I was on the football team. Yeah.
All right. Our next question comes from Douglas Gier, Rutgers College, 1987. And he writes, I'm pleased to hear that efforts are underway in amplifying inclusion. Does this include those who hold a conservative point of view?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yes, that's a very simple question to answer. It's an important question to ask. It's simple to answer. Look, the university properly functioning is about the marketplace of ideas. That ideas come here. I mean, there aren't many institutions that are charged with taking really, really old ideas, things that stand the test of time, and like they form a canon, or there are things that everybody has to know, and support those people who come in and say, no, no, no. And sometimes people who come in and ask these pointed questions about the canon are wrong, and sometimes they're right. And that's not a conservative idea. It's not a liberal idea. That's just ideas at play doing the hard work of testing each other out. And it will make, I mean, a healthy university community is a hard one. I mean, it's where ideas are wrestled over, and hopefully respectfully, ideally respectful. I mean, I expect them to be wrestled over respectfully. And sometimes there's some pretty ugly ideas out there, but the best way to combat them is to shine a light on them and prove them wrong. So, yes.
Good. This next question comes from a classmate of mine, Clive Davis, Rutgers College, 1993, who writes, what accomplishments are you most proud of in your Rutgers tenure so far?
In all 10 months of it. Well, I take complete responsibility for the men and women basketball teams going to March Madness. That was my work, my effort. So thank you for acknowledging that. No, I mean, well, hats off to them. Hats off to many different Rutgers sports having really banner years. If you're paying attention now, I think we have half a dozen teams in the top 25 in the country. It's an impressive moment. For which I take no honest credit, but it's fun. It's fun to be there on the sidelines. I mean, I really am being very serious about being intentional of trying to take this large community, 100,000 people, and getting people to aspire for it to become a beloved community. Now, beloved communities are usually 20 people, 30 people, of course. But to me, I find it inspirational to think about bringing people together from very different backgrounds, different stations in life, and recognize we all share something in common. Like, I can't see the hundreds of you that are off screen right now. I'm not literally a Rutgers alum, but boy, do we share something in common. And I've only been here 10 months. Becky, who I just met, she and I share something in common, and it's real. And what has been gratifying to me is that when I talked about a beloved community, when I was introduced in January of 2020, and I echoed it on my first day's message to the community on July 1st, what's been gratifying is that I've heard that echoed back to me from other people second and third hand. They weren't telling me, but they might tell someone on my senior team. Like, we're trying to find something that is within the sort of these broader parameters of these ideals of the beloved community. Is this what we should be doing? That's gratifying, because that means people are trying. They're trying to think of ways to recognize the things we have in common instead of the things that we don't share in common and that are often, frankly, tearing us apart in this country right now. I just wish we'd all think about the things we share in common. I think we actually share far more in common than we are trained to believe that we do. And to know that my message is resounding with some people, I can't measure it. I can't tell you that it's a certain percentage, but it feels good. It really does.
I know you're speaking much more broadly than just sports and having that in common, but you're an American history professor. Are you a big sports fan as well? Is your family big sports fans?
Well, I am a sports fan in general. I mean, I love speaking about sports in general, college sports. Look, one can talk about all the things that are wrong with college sports, and there's plenty wrong with it. And I know that there are communities in Rutgers who are really angry that we're in the Big Ten and that college sports takes up all the budget. I mean, it takes up 2% of the university budget is devoted to athletics. And we're on the verge of incredible returns on investment by joining the Big Ten. It's been a long time coming, but we're on that verge. But that's not why I like college sports. I like college sports because I love working with college athletes because they fail every day, which is a strange thing to say, but I love working with people who every day fail many times and get up and try again. Because they kind of this resilience and this determination, like they're going to succeed eventually. And look, I was a scrub at Stanford in playing football. I literally played one play, 11 seconds in my career. Literally, it's the most pitiful story. But I know that I've benefited in the long term because there is something in me that is incredibly stubborn, that I just believe, rightly or wrongly, that I'm going to figure the thing out, whatever the thing is. It's just going to take repetition. And so I want to surround myself with people who think like that. And I see that in the world of college sports.
Let's get to another question from the audience. This one comes from Roberta DiDonato, who's a Douglas College 1980 graduate. Her question is, regarding your vision for Rutgers University post-pandemic, what do you believe to be the biggest obstacle to overcome?
You know, I mean this quite seriously. It'll be the psychological challenge of being around each other again. I mean, we are all hungering for it, but it's very awkward to, like, do you shake hands? Do you hug one another? What do you do? And I think about undergraduates in particular, that first month of school, no matter what year you are, is a hyper-social time. It's going to be strange when we come back. There's no doubt many students they will cast all concerns to the wind and will be social in all the way college students are. But there'll be a lot of students who are feeling uncertain about that. A lot of faculty and staff. So there's going to be a lot of how do we learn how to interact with one another again in ways that are safe. Now, that's at the level of sort of conceptual, philosophical. The things we have to really tend to is the financial repair to the university, because we suffered mightily. Every university did, and through COVID. And although the federal government and state government have made tremendous efforts to help us out, it's going to be 2 or 3 years before we are really back on our feet. My true hope is that some form of major infrastructure stimulus package. I know this is controversial with people, but if there's a major stimulus package, places like Rutgers might really be able to benefit, because Lord knows we could use the resources to put to work on the campus.
How big's the hole?
Well, it was before there was federal and state intervention. We were projecting well over $250 million hole in the deficit this year. It is now much more in the neighborhood of probably $50 to $60 million, but that's only with faculty and staff making tremendous sacrifices. With furloughs now, we finally agreed on a set of furloughs and work share programs, because that's 2/3 of our budget is salaries, which is standard in the industry. So it's been holding back pay, salary increases, now people taking furloughs. So people have sacrificed to help bring this, close that gap.
This question comes from Linda Rivers, Douglas College 1981. And she writes, looking at inclusion on another level, how will Rutgers ensure that alumni of the classes of 2020 and 2021 feel included now and into the future when they missed out on so much?
They missed out on so much. They really did. This is going to be important work that we have yet to solve. One of the things the chancellors and I are determined to do is to make plans, announce plans, the timeline for when we will invite those classes of 20 and 21 back to campus to recognize them for missing commencement. So we've got to do that. And then look, my job is to be engaged with alumni in a way that has really not been seen on campus in a while, and I'm determined to do it. So the question is spot on. We don't have the answer for it yet, but we know we've got to make amends with circumstances out of our control, but we need to make amends with our classes, pardon me.
Diane Narr from the School of Social Work, 1981, writes in, what will the university do to combat climate change?
Before I became president, President Barchi commissioned a task force on this very topic. That task force has been doing its work regularly prior to my arrival and since. Their final report, I think I will have it at the start of the summer. The plan is for me to respond to that report in September. And, so I don't want to say too much about what we're planning to do, but we are definitely going to be doing everything we can to be responsible members of our society as far as carbon footprint in terms of getting new power plants online that are much more environmentally friendly. The Board of Governors and Trustees announced that we'd be divesting from fossil fuel as an investment vehicle over the next 10 years. And then one of our major areas of fundraising over the next, as far as I can see, is on areas dealing with climate change, particularly with our experts in marine sciences, to cite one group in particular where we have a lot of people doing important work in this space.
The hole in the budget that you were just talking about because of the pandemic, does it make it more difficult to try and take on some of those initiatives with climate change as a result?
It does. I mean, that's a fact of it. But, my job is to think about the university beyond 1, 3, and 5 years, is really to thinking about the university after I leave, and the Board of Governors jobs think of the university over the course of the next 30 years. So we need to build the plans now and start putting into place the things we can afford, because we are reaching a pivot inflection point. Some people say we're long past it, but where industries are going to respond in new ways. I mean, look at the auto industry and what it's doing in terms of electrification and such. We need to be ready for that. And there's going to be a lot of setup costs, and that's where I think infrastructure support, investment by the federal government could really come in handy. I'm kind of hoping for it, frankly.
You keep talking about long-term and planning for the university after you leave. You don't have any plans for when that's going to be, right?
No. I've been in higher ed long enough to and in senior administration for long enough to know that the students have the timeline of a year or like next month, frankly. Faculty are often, depending on where they are in their careers, are thinking in different lengths of time. But administrators are really meant to think, certainly the fire in front of them, but what are they going to have in place when it's their time to hand the baton to somebody else? And so that's just doing the job right, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I can't talk about leaving the Rutgers I've yet to experience. That would be rather awkward, since I've not had the joys of, like, I've never been in the RAC with more than 30 people. So what do I know about Rutgers? So yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
You will see. Yes. Be prepared. Here, I have one more question from the audience. This will be the last question from the audience, and I've got one or two more myself. But Stephen Oriel from Livingston College, 1994, writes in, I was at Rutgers when Becky was the editor of the Targum. Given the rise in misinformation and disinformation in media today, I'm curious about your perspectives, Becky through a journalistic lens and President Holloway through a historical lens. Why don't you go first?
Oh, I was going to say you should go first. Well, no, it's a great question. It's deeply concerning, especially like, the big news from Rutgers now has been the vaccine, right? And the vaccine mandate. And I understand people who are hesitant, given, say, histories in Black communities about the way in which they've been used as guinea pigs in, the Tuskegee experiment and syphilis studies. I get that. I still think the vaccine's safe and advocate for taking. Just had my shot on Monday, as a matter of fact. So I get the hesitancy from some communities where there's historical reason for it. I get that there are people who religious reasons or health reasons can't do it. That's all fine. What I don't have any patience for is that it seems like the deliberate efforts to destabilize a vaccination effort, deliberate efforts to spread things that aren't truthful about science and amplify risks beyond any level of reason. And what that does is destabilizes the country. And that may sound grand to you, but I think it's true. It destabilizes the country. And I think the people investing in disinformation campaigns are incredibly narcissistic, self-involved, and uninterested in the country doing well. They're looking for a short-term gain, whether it's attention, financial tool, or something leveraged, and they're greedy. So I have no patience for it, but I have no idea how to stop it. The problem is way beyond my ability, except to call it out when it's around me.
And as a journalist, I would just say it's been really kind of baffling to watch this idea of alternative facts. Look, there are alternative opinions, there are alternative perspectives, and I value and appreciate both of those. But facts are facts, whether that be science, whether that be some other measurable, quantifiable, actual facts. There aren't alternative facts. And again, I appreciate different perspectives, and I try to understand where everybody's coming from on things. I would agree that my frustration comes from amplified voices, particularly because of social media. Not that everybody doesn't deserve a voice, but if you're deliberately misleading people and that is getting amplified, that does a disservice to our nation. I do think a democracy is built on an informed populace. And the only way to be informed is to know that you are reading the truth, reading the facts. And again, different perspectives, we all come from this differently, and I appreciate and value that. But we should be using the same set of facts so that we can each reach our own conclusions on what that takes us to. Trust in media is awful. Congress right now has a higher rating, which that's a new one.
Wow.
Nobody likes Congress. And that's unfortunate. Look, I just think we need an informed population, and that there's no way a democracy can really work if you don't have that. So,
I'm just one very quick thing before we go to your closing questions. We have impoverished ourselves because we've gotten to a place where disagreement seems to no longer be okay. Like disagreement is like a value judgment. And I think that's part of what feeds into the disinformation or the alternative fact culture. It's like, no, I mean, it's okay to disagree. It's actually quite healthy. In fact, it's really important to learn how to disagree and find a way forward. But we seem to be in a deficit mode when it comes to that kind of thinking, which makes me very sad and concerned.
And I would just add to that, the idea that we put ourselves in these bubbles where you only listen to people you feel comfortable with, whether that be, cable networks that you're watching at night from one persuasion or the other, whether that be on your social media feed, blocking people, unfriending people who disagree with you. I would agree. I think you need that dialogue. And I think that's one of the best things of a liberal arts education is hearing those voices, which is why I'm also glad to hear that you think all points of view should be present, conservative and beyond, that you have to have these discussions. You can't be blocked out.
Ironically, we agree.
And that's okay too, from time to time. I'll end this just asking, you talked earlier about your most challenging moments since you've been at Rutgers and the biggest issues you faced, but what's been your best moment? What's been maybe one time that you've walked out and thought, okay, this is why I came?
I want to tell a story on a student whose name I don't know, but it's a really sweet story. I was going up into the Honors College in New Brunswick to do a recording, as I do often. This is for a recorded statement. And I go up to the set in the lobby of the Honors College, forgetting that we had opened up the Honors College for people to live in again. This was early in the spring semester. And And I'm walking to the set, but I see 5 students sitting at a table. This is my first time I saw live students like doing student work. They're studying. And they don't know who I am. These are first year students on campus for the first time. I go over there all with my mask on, and I'm beaming through my mask, and I'm going to say hello. At the same time, I'm realizing, oh my God, they don't know who I am. This is embarrassing already, but I can't stop. And then one of the students looks up and she goes, oh, hey. So she recognized me. And we ended up talking for, I don't know, probably no more than 5 minutes. Talked about what they're studying, talked about the honors college as a site. They were really excited to be there. And then I turned, I'm like, well, I've got to go do this recording like 30 feet away. And I'm turning away. She goes, wait, can we take your picture? Can we do a selfie? I'm like, of course you can. So we took some pictures together. As I walked away, just floating, this student, bless her heart, said something along the lines of, I know this is ridiculous, but that's the most famous person I've ever met. And it made me want to say she needs to get out more often, but it was a reminder to me, and let's face it, to my ego. I mean, but it was just, I work in this area to work with people who are hungry to learn, who are excited to discover, who are, love their university. And for me, that was a reminder. And COVID has taken that from us, from all of us. And to get that, just that little taste, I don't think my feet hit the ground for, hours after that one.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much. We met for the first time via Zoom just before this, 10 minutes before this started. We've had a little bit of correspondence back and forth, but I want to say thank you for being so open and honest. You didn't tell me what questions I could or couldn't ask. We didn't rehearse any of this. And I just want to thank you for taking all of this directly on and for reaching out to all of us as alumni. I want to give you the last word on this, but again, Jonathan, thank you very much for this time tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. This has been really exciting to get to know you. And thanks to the alumni who wrote in, who spent the time with us this evening. I know you have lots of other things you can do. And the idea of another Zoom meeting, not on top of anybody's list, but you're here, and I appreciate that. And what I'll say is, look, I have been part of the Rutgers family since January of 2020, officially since July 1st. Couldn't be happier. And I can't wait to meet you in person. I can't wait to engage you and hear about the things you wish we could do better, but also remind you of all those things that we do well and the things that we share in common, because that is how we are going to make a better Rutgers, a better state, a better country, and a better world.
President Holloway, thank you very much for your time tonight. And folks, thank you for joining us. I really had a great time. So thank you very much. Everybody stay safe and healthy, and hopefully we'll check back in again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.